to having something to eat in Kentucky when the miners was all blacklisted and no work. So I said if I lost my life, that I would do anything in this world that I could in order to keep the children from suffering. So there was a young family that had one child that lived just below me, and I heard that little child crying for 2 days. And I went down and I asked the mother, I said, Daisy, what is the matter with that baby? She said, Aunt Molly, she's crying for something to eat. I don't have a crust of bread for that child. So I said, is it possible that I will do more for your children, you people, than you will do yourselves? I said, in the name of common sense, have you got a 50-pound feed sack here, sugar sack or something to give me? Yes, she said. I took that sugar sack and I went back to the house. Me being a midwife, I had a permit to carry a gun. I had a good .38 special that I'd use for my protection through them hills for 15 years then. And I put it under my arm and put my coat on over it, and I started to the commissary. But when I got down to the foot of the hill, there was another family of children of 7 crying, all small children. And I said, well, what is the matter with your children, Ann? It was Bob Stringer's wife. A good, hard-working man, and kept his family plenty when he was allowed to work. So she says, they're hungry and I don't have a thing. And she was a-crying. I said, come on, Henry, to my little son, Henry Jackson. I said, come on and go with me. I went into the commissary, and I went in laughing. And I said to the commissary clerk, I said, well, it don't make any difference how hard times gets, Mr. Martin. I said, I can always have a little money or a little scrip or something to get by on. Give me a 24-pound sack of flour. He handed me over the 24-pound sack of flour, and I whispered to my little son, I said, Henry, take this 24-pound sack of flour and walk out and wait for me at the tipple. That is where they weighed the coal and dumped it in the cars. The boy took that sack of flour and he walked out. And then I began to call for the things that was needed the worst for them little starving children. And I filled my sugar sack full, and I said, now, Martin, I said, I'll see you in 90 days as quick as I can get around and collect enough money to pay you. But I says, how much is this? $5.90. Well, I said, I'll see you in 90 days. I said, I have to feed some children. They'll starve, and they can't wait for me to go around and try to collect by nickels and dimes enough to get them something to eat. They have to eat now. And I'll pay you, don't worry. He says, Aunt Molly Jackson, don't you offer to walk out with them groceries. I reached under my arm and I pulled my pistol and I walked out backwards. And I said, Martin, if you try to take this grub away from me, I said, God knows if they electrocute me for it tomorrow, I said, I'll shoot you 6 times in a minute. I walked out. I got home, and these 7 little children were so hungry that when the mother was making up the dough to cook the bread, they was grabbing the raw dough off of their mother's hands and cramming it into their mouth and swallowing it. And I left part of that, part of the food with that big family of children. I went on up to Bill Allen's house and gave Daisy Allen, his wife, the rest for her little child. And by the time my house was the next house, and by the time I got into the door, their deputy sheriff was there to arrest me. And he said to me, he says, well, Aunt Molly, what in the world, he says, he says, have you turned out, says, to be a robber? I said, oh, no, Frank. I said, I'm no robber. But I said, it was the last chance I have heard these little hungry children cry for something to eat till I'm desperate. I'm almost out of my mind. And I said, I will get out, as I said, and collect that money just as quick as I can and pay it. I said, you know I'm as honest as the days is long. And the tears come in his eyes. And he said, well, Aunt Molly, he says, they sent me up here, he says, to arrest you. The coal operator, O.L. Gooden, sent me here to arrest you. He was the coal operator. For that, but he says, if you've got the heart to do that much, he says, for other people's children, that's not got one drop of your blood in their bodies, he says, I will pay that bill myself, he says. And he says, if they fire me for not arresting you, he said, I will be damn glad of it. It's just the words he said. And he walked out, and he didn't arrest me.